We're joined now by Josh Paunil, who joins us each week at this time. Talk a little bit about the Eagles and the Giants game tonight, and also what took place between the Eagles and the Ravens and that 1-point loss the Birds had down there. Josh, welcome.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
Appreciate you coming on, and I guess first and foremost, we'll get into a little bit of the Eagles-Ravens stuff and the things that took place down there. It's been an interesting week, another interesting week where you had a situation with Doug Peterson getting second-guessed by almost all the fan base, and then the media trying to scratch their heads over what some of his answers were. You had a guy who was a starting defensive player rip his coordinator. Just another week in Eagle land, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the one thing that surprised me the most after that game was how not just Jalen Mills, but a few of the defensive backs, Malcolm Jenkins, Rodney McLeod, they all mentioned that they didn't love the play call that Jim Schwartz had on that Steve Smith, I think it was 35-yard touchdown pass right before the half. And, we've obviously seen them give up big plays, especially in the last 5 or 6 games. But I believe that's the first time that I can remember, at least, that the players specifically pointed out that they didn't like the play call from their defensive coordinator.
And Jim Schwartz saying that we're going to have some conversations. Of course, he doesn't tell us what those conversations are. But, yeah, it is a little interesting when you see a guy come out and sort of rip his guy. Now, I guess to you, Josh, then that's just another example of the Eagles not finishing a football game. Why can't they finish football games?
I mean, I think, honestly, it's just come down to talent. I mean, when you look at there are so many, the majority of NFL games are decided by one possession. So when you talk about, the Eagles, you can say all you want, if 1 or 2 more plays went their way, if, the Ravens didn't bat the ball by just an inch, if they could have done this or that. But every NFL team could say that. And so when you're, 0-6 in one possession games, that's just a sign that you're just not as good as the talent that you're going up against. Not much separates all these teams in the NFL. Obviously, you have some really good teams like the Patriots, some really bad teams like the Browns, but most of the teams are somewhere in the middle where they can at least keep up with everybody else. But the Eagles just don't have enough, and they haven't played well enough to put themselves over the top.
Josh Paunil joining us here. Scott Grayson with you, Josh. Looking at your Twitter feed, I see you put up a GIF of some of Carson Wentz's bad throws this past weekend, and it's his footwork. I'm wondering, with Lane Johnson back in this tonight, do you expect Carson Wentz to revert back to more of what he was doing right earlier in the season, technique and footwork wise, because maybe he trusts this starting 5 offensive line a little bit more?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that has at least a little bit of an impact, because obviously Carson Wentz, even if he thinks, at the time when Big V was getting better, or if he thought that Isaac Seumalo could plug in fairly well, and he did, you obviously know who's protecting you. And so when you have Lane Johnson back in, even though it's his first game back, he hasn't been on a football field for 10 weeks, you know that you can rely on him a little bit more. But when it comes to footwork and other mechanical technique, things like that, that's completely on him. It's just a matter of, him sometimes it looks like his feet are just kind of stuck in cement. And now these are all things that really every quarterback goes through, whether you want to talk about his footwork or his mechanics. I think it was a few weeks ago, some people were talking about how long his motion was. Russell Wilson went through that. So a lot of these mechanical things are really on him. It's just a matter of him drilling it every week with DeFilippo, the quarterback's coach, Frank Reich, and Doug Peterson, obviously. And so Lane Johnson being back will help him a little bit, but it's mostly just on him to make sure that he has the right techniques and fundamentals down in and down out.
Speaking of Lane Johnson, what was it? 4 days ago, he was still, on his couch in Oklahoma. How do you expect to see him do tonight? He hasn't had much time to try to get back into the swing of things with his, particularly his offensive line teammates. What do you expect out of Lane Johnson?
Yeah, well, I mean, I expect a guy with a ton of energy, just really, really pumped up about this game and being able to come back. And so I think you'll see some really impressive blocks, some things that we saw in the first 4 weeks. But I also think you'll see him kind of get tired toward the end of the game, maybe even in the third quarter, not necessarily just the fourth quarter, because, it's one thing to work out and go to the gym and do drills, but it's completely another thing to be in football game shape. And that's something that when you miss 10 weeks, no matter what you do off the field, you're just not going to have that same stamina. So I think you'll see some impressive blocks. I think you'll see a little bit of fatigue toward the end. One thing I'm curious to see if maybe he'll be a little jumpy because he has so much energy, commit a couple of penalties. But this is something that even if he does get fatigued, even if he does commit a penalty or two, he should be significantly better than anyone else they can put out there because basically every other tackle they have is injured.
Josh Paunil with us, Birds 24/7, PhillyMag.com, as the Eagles play the Giants tonight, 8:25 at Lincoln Financial Field. And Josh, let's get into this matchup a little bit. Of course, there's been a lot of dialogue this week about how the Eagles are trying not to go winless in the division. That's a motivating factor. But they also get back Darren Sproles tonight, and then you saw what Ryan Matthews was able to do against the number one rushing defense in Baltimore. Is running the ball one key to victory for the Eagles tonight?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one thing that the Giants have been able to do so well. Since these two teams last met, the Giants are 5-1, and obviously a big reason of that is because of their defense. Their offense hasn't played that much better than they started the year. The special teams hasn't been that much better, but the defense has been more dominant, especially in the last couple of weeks. And it all starts with stopping the run, because when you're able to stop the run and you're able to get those teams into third and medium, third and long, obvious passing down situations, it makes life a lot easier for you, especially if maybe if they're without Janoris Jenkins. If you don't have that guy out there, but you're able to get them in third and longs, it makes life easier on your cornerback. So that was something that was really impressive last week, especially because Carson Wentz had an awful game, maybe his worst of his young career so far. So the Ravens knew that the Eagles would have to run it, but they still had success. Jason Kelsey played well. Jason Peters played well. Brandon Brooks. So a lot of these guys, these offensive linemen, played really well last week, and you would think that should translate this week, especially when they get Lane Johnson back.
Also, this game in Philadelphia, the Giants seem to have struggled at times in Philadelphia. How much will being at Lincoln Financial Field help the Birds?
Oh, it'll definitely help it, and not just because of the Eagles and their success. 4-2 at home this year. Obviously, it's been rougher lately, but they're a different team at home versus on the road. But also the Giants, even this year, even though they're having a lot of success this season, they haven't been quite as good on the road. They're 7-1 at home, but on the road, they had a good win against the Cowboys in Week 1, but outside of that, which obviously you can't completely discount that, but outside of that, they haven't really had that good of a road win. And they're 500 on the road. So this is a team that's different, even if it's just down I-95 a little bit. It's going to be a different atmosphere, especially with the Eagles just trying to get that first division win. I do think not just trying to show up for this division game, but Lane Johnson being back will bring some energy to this team. So it will definitely be a much more favorable atmosphere for the Eagles this time versus the last time these two teams met.
Josh, I believe Jason Pierre-Paul is out tonight, and I know Janoris Jenkins is a game-time decision for the Giants, although it sounds like he might not be able to go. How much easier do things get for Carson Wentz in the offense if Janoris Jenkins and Jason Pierre-Paul are not there?
Oh, I mean, they get much easier because if they're without Jason Pierre-Paul, his replacement is an undrafted free agent rookie. And so even though he has, especially against the Cowboys, he had some success, but Jason Pierre-Paul's replacement, big downgrade behind him. So Carson Wentz will have a little bit more time in the pocket, a little bit more time to go through his progressions and make decisions. But then obviously without Janoris Jenkins, that's really going to be a huge hit to that secondary. Now, Eli Apple, their rookie first-round pick, he's been playing much better. He had the worst game of his season against the Eagles the first time around when he got benched, but the Giants put him back in there, and he's been making plays for them. So still, without Janoris Jenkins, the coverage just gets a lot easier. Now, the one thing is, it's not like the Eagles have downfield threats to take advantage of that necessarily, but it will make things easier. But really the big thing is Jason Pierre-Paul being out, Lane Johnson being back. That should be a matchup on the right side where really almost every game the last month, or maybe even the last 2 months, they've had to give help to their right tackle, whether it's Ty or Tobin or Barber or whomever, giving them chip help from the running back or the tight end. But now they should be able to leave Lane Johnson out on an island, so maybe just extend that extra pass catcher out onto a route or help somewhere else. But that should definitely open up things for Carson Wentz and the Eagles offense.
You talked about some of the energy that Lane Johnson's going to bring tonight. Perhaps the team will feed off of some of that. He's on one side of the ball. On the other side of the ball, what do you see out of the Eagles' defense against the Giants' offense tonight? Do you think they'll be able to get some pressure and possibly get to Eli early in the game? Because it seems like that's one way you can affect that offense in a big way.
Honestly, I don't see them getting to Eli that much tonight. Eli just gets the ball out of his hands so quickly, and really what the Giants do a lot of is because their run game isn't that good, they just do a lot of quick 4 or 5 yard passes as kind of a substitute to the run game, and that's something that just killed the Eagles the first time around. Not being able to get a sack, not really being able to get much pressure at all. So you have the combination of Eli Manning getting the ball out of his hands quickly, and that's a big reason that he's one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the league. So really what it's going to come down to is I think the cornerbacks are really going to have to play press more than they're used to. You see, Nolan Carroll, he really likes playing press. Jalen Mills is more of a physical guy, but Leonis McKelvin, sometimes he's a little bit more off than up on the line of scrimmage. The Eagles cornerbacks really have flexibility on every play, determining whether they press, whether they're off. And because Eli Manning gets the ball out of his hands so quickly, they have to give their defensive line a chance to get to him. So they're going to have to press guys. They're going to have to just get in tight coverage. And one thing you saw to start that game the last time these two teams met was Odell Beckham taking a quick slant for a touchdown. Obviously, the defensive line has no chance in situations like that. So you really have to get up on the line, disrupt the timing, and kind of throw the receivers off the rhythm that they have with Eli.
Josh, I know that the corners, it's either corner or wide receiver, are the two targets that fans and media people go to as the biggest weaknesses on the Eagles team. But since you just mentioned the cornerbacks, I'd like to know, did Jim Schwartz, did the Eagles brass, did the front office overvalue what they were getting? Did they misvalue what they were getting in the corners? Because I don't know if they've performed up to the expectations that everybody thought they were going to.
Well, part of it is I don't think their expectations were that high because Leonis McKelvin, he's been a backup for at least the last few years and obviously hasn't lived up to his first-round draft status. Ron Brooks is another guy that hasn't been a starter elsewhere. So these guys they signed weren't starters elsewhere. But even though the expectations weren't that high, I do think they haven't lived up to them just because you haven't been – Ron Brooks is obviously a special case because – he's on the injured reserve. But Leonis McKelvin, even though the Eagles didn't give him much money, he has not been serviceable. And so, Jim Schwartz talks a lot about how the one big thing he looks for in his cornerbacks is, how competitive are they, the type of mindset. That's really what he values. And that's why I think he really likes Jalen Mills and why they didn't like Harold Grove very much was because he's looking for a certain mindset to have. But the problem is it doesn't matter if you have that mindset if the guys make too many mistakes. So, it's nice if the cornerbacks are resilient and they can put the last play behind them. But the problem is they have to put too many plays behind them because they keep giving up those big plays and making mistakes. So this cornerback class didn't come in with many expectations. I think a lot of people viewed it as one of the worst cornerback situations coming into the season. But even with that, they have not played well, and they're going to have to make some significant upgrades in the offseason.
It's funny because one of the narratives about the Giants is the reason that they're much improved is that the money they spent on defense. And early in the week, Scott Grayson and I went through and looked at some of the money in teams that committed guaranteed money since the start of the league. And the Jaguars committed $122 million. They have 2 wins to show for it. Denver Broncos, $168, Eagles, $160, Saints, $145, Giants, $135, and the Jaguars, $122. So you've got a situation where of all those teams that committed all this money since the free agency signing started, only the Giants are making the playoffs. I guess, Josh, what that does is it then takes you to how does Howie draft and how are they rebuilding this team? There's a lot of questions about where this team's going to go forward. How do you see them moving forward with that balance of free agency versus draft?
Well, specifically at cornerback, I think that they're going to have to both bring in a free agent and also draft a guy. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they take a cornerback in the first round. Maybe it's a guy like Lattimore from Ohio State or Tabor from Florida. But I think that there's a pretty good chance. Obviously, we don't know exactly where they're going to pick yet, but I do think cornerbacks will be near the top of the Eagles' board. Now, at wide receiver, I think it'll be the same thing. You have to get a veteran in here. I mean, your oldest wide receiver on the Eagles is 24. I mean, you don't really have much veteran leadership in there. Now, I think the guys really respect Jordan Matthews, but obviously at just 24, so young into his career, he's not a veteran. And so you have to bring in a veteran, but also draft a guy. And so the cornerback class this year is better than the receiving class. So that's why I think there's a better shot to get a corner in the first round. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe a guy like Mike Williams from Clemson falls, and they can get him. But they're going to have to invest both in free agency and in the draft at receiver and cornerback because those are two glaring holes and among the worst position groups in the NFL.
Yeah, your colleague Brandon Lee Gouton saying 15, which is where the Eagles would pick in the first round of the NFL draft if the season ended today. And, of course, Eagles fans should be watching Minnesota the last 2 weeks because Minnesota could lose out. That pick could go as high as number 7, but 15 if the season ended today. We're spending a few minutes with Josh Paunil from PhillyMag.com and Birds 24/7.
Josh, I saw online you picked this game, I think 24-20 Giants. Tell me why you see this as another close game for the Eagles, and it's obviously been one of their biggest Achilles heels that they just can't get over the hump in the fourth quarter at the end of a game. They came close last week. Sounds like you see this one kind of maybe going down to the wire.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think that much separates these two teams. The one glaring difference between these two teams is how they finish games. The Eagles are 0-6 in one-possession games. The Giants are 8-2. And so, I mean, honestly, at first I was leaning toward the Eagles just, on the short turnaround. It's going to hurt the Giants a little more than the Eagles. Getting Lane Johnson back, playing at home, having that energy. I was really tempted to pick the Birds, but I just can't get over the fact that the Eagles have not won a close game this entire season. And we're in week 16, excuse me. And so I struggle to pick a team that can't finish. And I think it'll be a very close game. It really wouldn't surprise me no matter which way it goes. But because the Giants have proven time and time again that they can finish, and the Eagles have not, I have to pick the team that has come out on top consistently.
We had Zach Berman on a little bit earlier, and I'm curious for your thoughts on this as well. Obviously, the Eagles are having all kinds of trouble in the red zone. They can't score once they get in there. Why do you think that is? Is it because these receivers don't give Carson Wentz big enough windows to throw into, or is it because Carson has a hard time throwing into smaller windows when everything's condensed down within that 20-yard line and end zone?
Yeah, I mean, I think the red zone is really where you see the Eagles' lack of weapons coming back to haunt them because, I mean, even if you look at the last play that the Eagles had against the Ravens, Jordan Matthews, now he got open in his matchup, but Dorial Green-Beckham, I mean, he basically took the playoff. I mean, I honestly couldn't believe it. It was like he didn't even run a route, really. And so you have plays like that, and especially in that type of situation. Now, maybe he knows the ball's going to Jordan Matthews, but it doesn't matter. Just to see a guy really not doing much on the goal line, and you don't have the talent. In that case, I don't think you had the effort. So I really think a lot of it comes down to the receivers and just the lack of weapons because the Eagles haven't had that much of a problem moving the ball. It's really been the red zone where they've had all these issues, and they just don't have guys where you can say, okay, go beat your man. And that's really why the Eagles need to invest so much into at least a receiver, ideally multiple receivers in the offseason, because who can Carson Wentz just go to and say, okay, I'm just going to throw the ball up to you. We're going to have this one-on-one matchup. Go beat your guy. The Eagles really don't have much in the form of that. And so that's really that area that it comes back to haunt you. Now, obviously, Carson Wentz has made mistakes in the red zone. You have the interceptions and mistakes like that, but the receivers really have not shown up at all in the red zone.
Josh Paunil, PhillyMag.com. One thing I know you do each week, Josh, is a little bit of digging on the opponent, and you found out how are the Giants different than when they first played the Birds in Week 9, and the Giants won that game 28-23. How are the Giants different?
I mean, really the big difference is just the dominance of the defense. You see a guy, even we mentioned Pierre Paul being out and Janoris Jenkins being questionable, probably out tonight. But even without those guys, they've been able to step it up, and a big reason, as I mentioned, Eli Apple. The linebackers have been much improved. Jonathan Casillas, Shepard, Keenan Robinson. And then Landon Collins, the second-year guy that, a lot of people were saying, can the Eagles get him in the first round last year? And if they could, should they take him over a guy like Nelson Aguilar? And obviously that Landon Collins pick by the Giants is looking pretty good, and he's really continued his ascent this season. Olivier Vernon, the big free agent acquisition, the big prize really back in the offseason, he's been healthier and he's been playing better. So truly on all three levels, you see an improvement. But again, they're going to be without Jason Pierre-Paul, probably Janoris Jenkins. So even though the coverage might be tight, Carson Wentz should have some time tonight. It's going to be a matter of, can he find those open targets, and can his receivers get open and do their part?
What do you expect out of Eagle Nation tonight? Do you think there's going to be more shirts in blue or blue and white than midnight green out there? What are you projecting is going to fill the stadium at Lincoln Financial Field?
Oh, I have to say that the Eagles fans are gonna way outnumber the Giants fans. I just can't see a situation where, maybe the one thing I will say is the Eagles-Washington atmosphere a couple of weeks ago, that kind of surprised me. Now, obviously the team wasn't doing well. There wasn't a ton of reason to be excited about the team, but there really wasn't much energy in that stadium. The attendance wasn't that great. It really picked up in the fourth quarter. But given Thursday night football, the Giants coming to town, I definitely think the Eagles fans will outnumber them. Now, how much noise will they make? Because of the fan base the Eagles have, I just, default, I'll say that I believe that they will show up and will make an impact. But obviously, if the team gets down early, as they have in the past, then that can really get the fans out of the game.
Let's just hope there's not another fight like there was that time in front of the press box, that memorable fight that took place. And I never saw so many tweets from different reporters' phones of, this is happening outside our press box right now.
Yeah, hopefully the violence is kept to a minimum this time around. We'll see.
It is South Philadelphia, and this is Josh Paunil with us from PhillyMag.com, and Birds 24/7 joins us each week with his breakdown of the game and the game to come. Hey, Josh, thanks so much for visiting us with us, and we'll talk to you again next week, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys.